Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Francesca Bizon. I'm the UK Marketing Manager with Airbus Protect, and I'll be helping to moderate this session. If you're not familiar with the brand, Airbus Protect is a subsidiary of Airbus. We specialise in safety, cybersecurity, and sustainability risk management, all delivered through high-value consultancy services and digital solutions. We're joined today by two of our Part IS experts, Thaddeus Eze and Sinena Aitan, are both cybersecurity consultants here at Airbus Protect. Before we start, I'd like to run through a little bit of housekeeping. The session is being recorded and we will share the slides with all attendees after the webinar. If you'd like to make use of the Q&A, please look at the bottom right-hand corner and you should see 3 dots on the WebEx platform. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please pop them in there. And then during the open Q&A at the end of the webinar, we'll address them directly with the consultants themselves. Also, during the Q&A, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can ask your questions directly if you have any. Okay, without moving on, without any further ado, I'd like to hand over to Thaddeus to start the presentation.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Can I confirm you can hear me well? Okay, good. Yes. Thank you very much. Okay. Yeah. Once again, thank you for joining us today, and it's really great to have you here today. I would like to start with looking at or reminding us about the scope of the regulation Part IS, and to say that this has nothing to do really with product security. And there are a lot of regulations and standards for dealing with information security within every approved organization and the ecosystem. But the regulation and the focus of our discussion today will largely be on the organizational information security management with regards to how it can affect or lead to aviation safety outcomes. So the focus is when you start your project to comply with Part IS, how do you start and where do you start? And let's look at first the scope of that project. In defining the scope for your own project, there are a number of points you need to address. And one of them is clearly identifying your business assets. And these business assets are the values that you provide to your customers. And the second point after the business assets are the supporting assets. And these supporting assets are all the IT and OT assets within your organization that you use to support the delivery of those business assets to your customers. And the third point that you need to address is the interface or the interfaces you have with your third parties, your suppliers and all that. We will talk more about the importance of this later on. And then the last point will be identifying and defining your reporting lines. And this includes your internal reporting and your external reporting. External reporting to the competent authority. This is already well established within your safety management system. And then obviously the risk information sharing with your interfaces that you define in the third point I mentioned before. So what is the question? The question is, what is it that we need to do differently? Next slide, please. So if we look at the left is the current way of working before the introduction of Part IS as it relates to information security management within an organization. And what you can see here is that every department or every group worked in silos, or maybe are still working in silos in your organization. But with the introduction of this regulation, this has to change. And changing in the sense that we now need to break the silos. We need to bring these teams together to achieve what we call an integrated security management. And this means that you no longer will be speaking from different perspectives, but you'll be speaking the same language, achieving the same goal, and following one approach. Is it going to be easy? No, it's not going to be easy, because what we are looking at here is well-established information security risk mapped with well-established safety management system or safety risk assessment. So the two teams that are working together or expected to work together to achieve this are well knowledgeable in their own fields. And so their coming together is not going to be easy, but it's going to be a challenging one. But the good thing is that the differences we bring together on the table are complementary. And what are the areas that are, or the areas of importance here? I did say about the mapping of security risk to safety. Now, the security team do not have the visibility of how safety assessment and safety impacts and outcomes are calculated or assessed. Likewise, the safety team are not having the visibility of how information security risks are assessed and how that can lead to known or unknown safety outcomes. And this is where it is important that the two teams work together. And one thing I recommend to organizations, a practical way of achieving this is don't wait until it is late. Don't wait until you start implementing patterns. You can actually start by creating an opportunity like a workshop for these two teams to come together and exchange ideas. The safety team presenting safety management analysis or safety risk analysis and within the SMS, and the security team explaining to the team how information security risk assessment is done. And with this approach, the two teams will begin to appreciate what the other is doing. And when it comes to mapping these two worlds together, it will be less difficult. Next slide, please. So there are a number of things that we need to do differently, and one of these will be your risk management. And this is particularly important because the classical ISMS, Information Security Management System, that we know, focuses around or has security risk assessment at its core. So what needs to be done differently? The regulation does not prescribe in terms of methodology, risk assessment methodology. You can use any methodology that you want or that is available in your organization. However, it does require that your methodology, whatever it is, has to be threat scenario based. And what does that mean? It means that you should be able to have an understanding of who might be your attackers, the threat actors. What might they do? How might they achieve their goal, like the attack path? And what are the elementary actions or the activities or the tactics they might use to achieve their goal? Because it's when you are able to understand what the attacker might do, then you can formulate how to stop them from doing that. It also requires that your risk methodology is repeatable and is comparable. And this is particularly important because, as I said earlier, when you define your scope, identifying your interfaces with your stakeholders, with whom you are mutually exposed to information security risk, which could actually lead to safety outcomes. The management of risk within this interface is a shared responsibility. And whether that risk assessment is done on your side or on the other side, or it is shared, the method that is used has to be comparable and has to be repeatable as well. One point to bear in mind is that risk management is far beyond risk assessment. Risk assessment is one aspect. And the other aspect is the governance structure that you need to put in place. Who is involved in making decisions, in doing the assessments and all that? So in your risk assessment, one of the activities that you will likely do is your business impact assessment. And in doing this, and since this is security for safety assessment, or since this takes into consideration safety, it is very important that you have safety stakeholders in the governance structure, in the room making the decisions as it relates to safety impacts of those assets. Another point is that at the end of the risk assessment, obviously you generate your risk treatment plan. But the regulation requires that the mitigations that you select for addressing your risk should not add new unacceptable risks to aviation safety. And it is important that you have safety stakeholders to be in the room to analyze, every mitigation that you have selected to address risks with potential impact on aviation safety, so that they can help to ensure that these mitigations will not introduce any new risk to safety in the system. And the final point I want to raise here is that risk management does not end with creating a risk treatment plan. Yeah, you have a risk treatment plan. However, there needs to be a strategic follow-up for the risk treatment plan. Obviously, we will see later on in terms of how to, when you define your hierarchy, responsibility, accountability, and all that table. But there needs to be a strategic follow-up to the risk treatment plan to ensure that every risk, especially the risk with potential impact on aviation safety, has a follow-up or a follow-through until that risk is closed. Either that the identified mitigations are successfully closed, so that you have that noted in your risk register. Next slide, please. So one thing I like saying to people is that this is not a sprint. It is actually a marathon, if you like. The journey of Part IS is a maturity journey. And what this means is that it happens in stages. So if we look at this as everything that we need to put in place, your policies and everything, you need to take the time to build exactly what you need to implement, and then the time to run, collect your KPIs, and then to improve what you have run. Remember, at the end of the day, it is an ISMS, but in this case, Civil Aviation Information Security Management System. So that brings us to the next stage, explaining the different phases that the competent authority has identified for us to follow. Next slide, please. And the first stage is the present and suitable. For those in the delegated rule, the applicability date was last month, and those within the other stakeholders, the applicability date is in February next year. However, the first stage requires that you have a fully documented ISMS. So your ISMS is in place. Your policies, your procedures, your processes are well documented. Not just documented, they are approved by the accountable manager or the authority in the approved organization. And this is submitted to the competent authority within or before the applicability date. And that takes us to the next stage. Once this is submitted, you have now entered into the operating stage. And currently, ESI is advising that this within 18 months, you should be implementing your documented ISMS. And this is when you start collecting your KPIs, your evidence. For example, risk assessment, you start implementing it. And the authority will come at this time to do an audit. And if the audit goes well, this is where you are confirmed, you have the confirmation of full compliance with the regulation. And that takes us to the next stage, which is the effective stage. With the day-to-day collection of KPIs and the processes and the application of your ISMS, you define your continuous improvement process. And now that brings me to the last point before I hand over to my colleague, which is the advice really to mind the gap. This is purely from what we've seen in practice today. Many organizations make this mistake of documenting their ISMS and implementing something a bit or entirely different from what is being documented. So what is the advice here? What we say is write what you want to implement in your documentation. And then in your at the operating stage, implement exactly what you have written. So minimize the gap between what you have written, the documentation, and what you have implemented or what you are implementing. And I will hand over to my colleague Sunain. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Thaddeus. So Thaddeus has given a real good overview on Part IS, the timelines and the expectations from the authorities. But as many of you know that are already on this journey of becoming Part IS compliant, or are starting off in this journey, is that it doesn't come with its challenges. So when we talk about challenges, Therese has already mentioned on probably the most important one, breaking down those silos between safety and security. So what does that mean? Making sure that everybody within the organization understands what Part IS is, that it doesn't just, it's not just, concerning those in the IT department of your organization, as many people have this impression of. It involves the entire organization. All the different key stakeholders will be involved at some point of the regulation. And it's important for everyone to be on board of that and to understand why actually EASA are putting such a regulation forward now. We know that technology is advancing, and we know that the aviation system is built on a bunch of legacy systems. So now we need to start breaking down those silos and understanding, are there new safety conditions? Are there new threat conditions that we now need to be aware of that we weren't aware of before, that could come from IT infrastructure or OT infrastructure, for example? So those are the type of conversations and thought processes that we need to be having. And of course, those conversations are not easy. So when you're having those conversations, who needs to be in the room? You need to have representatives or people from the IT side, the cyber side, but also from the engineering side, those on maintenance, those on the ground, who really heavily understand what the potential safety implications can be. So with all that being said, we then need to start managing risks and incident management. So what are the processes that we're using now? Obviously, as of now, so before Part IS, you have already got your SMS in place, you've got your safety processes and procedures in place. So what does Part IS expect? Well, now we need to make sure we have a implemented and operated ISMS. So can we leverage some of those processes and procedures that are already available to us in SMS? Do things need to be changed? Remember, it's a bi-directional relationship between your ISMS and your SMS. So those are the sort of conversations that we need to be understanding. The regulation touches on a threat-based scenario framework. So what does that actually mean? Well, we need to really think outside the box here. So could an IT server, if it was to go down, could it potentially have some kind of safety consequence? Yes, no. Those will be your high level answers. And then you go in and do different maturity levels within your risk assessment. So you do a strategic threat-based scenario, then your operational threat-based scenario, to understand what extent certain IT infrastructure could have on safety, for example. So we understand that there's many challenges involved within Part IS, organizational as well. So how is your organizational going to be structured? Do we have those key personnel with the right skill sets in place? If not, do we need to upskill our current employees? Do we need to bring in people from outside? Do we need to bring in more consultants or contractors to help us comply to Part IS? You have to understand that, what those skill gaps are, and to identify them early on, but also to understand what and who are those key personnels that are responsible for us to be compliant to Part IS. Who are they? Do they know what is expected from them? Do they align with what the regulation sets out? So to have those conversations early on, and to have those, again, like today I said, written, and have those processes in place, will help speed up those processes and to help speed up those conversations as well. So I'm going to focus on two key challenges that we're seeing across the board. So we've obviously been out there on the field speaking to all of our customers from the entire aviation ecosystem. So if we can go on to the next slide, we're going to be touching on a key challenge here, which is the organizational structure, right? So now if we look at how an approved organization is set out, is color coordinated in the light blue. But now what does the regulation expect, right? So who are those other personnel that now need to be involved for us to be compliant to Part IS? So, people confuse IT and cybersecurity, for example. You could have an IT team of 30 people, but maybe one or two of them could have some kind of cyber knowledge, right? So cyber and IT are not the same thing. And for this regulation, for us to be compliant, you need to have people with the cyber skill set that can do incident management, that can that can negotiate with a SOC, that understand what a SIEM is, that understand what kind of risk could arise from the IT side that could potentially have a safety consequence. So those are niche skill sets, and again, understanding whether we have those in-house or not is really important, because if we don't, then we'd have to obviously go through training courses. So, and those that are on the call that are on from the IT side, for example, so you'd already be familiar with what an ISMS is. And for those on the safety side or on from the organizational side, you're already familiar with what an SMS is. So this is just the other side of it, right? So this is what the regulation wants us to set out. So a few things to think about when we're understanding what that organizational structure needs to look like. You first need to see how, because every organization is different and every organization is complex as well. So if you're an approved organization with multiple approvals, you may want to have a common responsible person. So this is the CRP term has actually come from the regulation itself. You can call it whatever you want, for example. So sometimes we like to call it a Part AS officer. So they're the ones that have oversight over the different approvals and the different ISMSs, for example. So they're the ones that are making sure that everyone is complying to the Part AS regulation, and that across the different approvals, and they work under the CEO. So whoever the CEO is, or your category manager, they'll be working underneath them. If you've got a CISO, for example, well, who is your CISO currently reporting to? There's been cases where the CISO might be reporting to the CTO. Well, we know, especially now from the regulation, there's a conflict of interest there. That's not considered best practice. So your CISO typically should be reporting directly to your CEO, and your CISO should be working independent from the CTO as well. So these are the type of conversations that you now need to be having. Again, just to rehash, understand what your current organizational structure looks like. What are those current skill sets that are missing? How can we get people trained up? What are those courses that we can take them onto? Who's involved at a high level in the Part AS for the Part AS regulation? Do they know what roles and responsibilities that they should be conducting? Do they have those expertise? So those are the things that big conversations that need to be having, that you need to be having, but having them at an early stage will make the rest of the process a lot more easier. So once everyone knows exactly what they should be doing and why they should be doing it, then it will make the rest of the stages a lot more easier once those organizational structural issues or problems that you may be having are ironed out. So we can go on to the next slide. So again, I've spoken about the SMS and the ISMS. It's really important to remember that it's not a one-size-fits-all, and it's a bi-directional relationship. So sometimes when I'm in the conversation with customers, they say to me, you know, with those from the organizational side or the SMS side, they say this is an IT problem. It's for IT to fix. It's not for us to be involved in, and the SMS is not involved. And I say, well, no, actually, that's not true. What the regulation is saying, and what the regulation is telling us, that what we now need to be thinking about is, for example, let's say if you've identified a new failure condition, and you have never identified it before, but we know that it comes from, the IT side, from your ISMS side. That would then trigger your SMS, right? So if someone, for example, that is sitting in your incident response team or your cyber team, for example, and they see an alert come in, and they know from your risk assessments that you previously conducted that this could potentially lead to a safety condition, right? At that point, they need to understand that who they need to contact, right? So they need to understand, okay, let's try to remediate this problem. Let's try to prevent it from becoming a failure condition, for example. But then it gets to a point or a level where they think, okay, we can't actually mitigate this security incident. So those on the organizational side or the safety side now need to trigger their SMS. So they are in contact with those from the safety side, whether it's your SMS officer, whoever it is. They're saying, okay, you obviously know we've had this incident. We've tried to mitigate this incident. However, we're not able to. So you guys need to now trigger your SMS and your incident response strategy from your SMS for us to really mitigate this condition. So for that relationship to really work, both sides need to know who they need to be contacting, when they need to be contacting, how they should be contacting. Is it an email? Is it a Teams message? Is it a phone call that this is a serious problem, you have to deal with this right now? If a contact's not available, who's next in line to be contacting? There needs to be an entire triage from both sides, from your ISMS side and your SMS side, and it needs to be both sides need to know about it, and those relationships need to be present. They need to know who they're supposed to be talking to, how they're supposed to be talking to be able to triage some of these activities. So that's why we emphasize on formalizing those relationships between for example, your safety failure and your threat conditions, understanding what they are, understanding those key personnel that are involved in coming up with what that could potentially look like. And again, not only just from a formal place, but actually make sure you're doing it. So you may want to conduct playbook activities. So triage an event. You can do like some test runs and some test cases to make sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's something that I would definitely recommend for activities like this, because you need everyone to be thinking on the spot to prevent certain situations from actually happening. Or, you know, if it was to happen, then you know exactly what to be doing. So having those playbooks ready, doing those exercises, doing those tabletop exercises will really help formalize those relationships between your SMS side and your ISMS side, making sure everyone is familiar with each other and ironing out or any issues that you may be facing too. So the Part IS regulation is going to bring up a lot of conversations that we haven't previously had within our organizations. It's definitely involved breaking down a lot of misconceptions and silos, but from our conversations from the field, actually these activities have been crucial. So when we're out there, we're speaking to customers, we're now seeing the conversations change, and those from the safety side are saying, okay, we understand why this regulation is so important now. We understand why we need to have a better relationship with those in the IT and cyber side, and vice versa. So there's definitely already been a change in mindset compared to when this regulation first came out and everyone was confused about what this actually means and who it involves. Those misconceptions are definitely loosening up, but it's important for you within your organizations to make sure that you're setting that standard for everyone else to follow. So if you show the regulation importance, if you understand why this regulation importance, then of course the teams will also follow. So these are the two main ones that we've addressed at the moment. And of course, we've got to bear in mind all the other problems that could arise. But we can go on to the next slide, because now we're going to start talking about lean implementation and how we can actually go on to start implementing Part IS. So my colleague today will take it over.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sunaina. And let's start by looking at one of the strategic decisions you really need to make in your organization. And with this, what we are recommending here is there's no point reinventing the wheel. Ideally, there should be an existing ISMS in place. The goal here is for us to build capacity to get to a point where you are able to address advanced level of cybersecurity attacks. Okay, so the goal is to have one ISMS that addresses both safety and security requirements. And we'll see how this works in the next slide. So where do we start? I did say that ideally you should have an existing ISMS that is based obviously on a best practice framework like ISO 27001 or whatever you choose. So what this means is that if you currently do not have an information security management system in place, this is an opportunity for you to start one. Okay, By lean implementation here, we're saying that we're encouraging to get things right the first time, to avoid retrofitting solutions at the end of the day. So if you don't have any existing ISMS, my recommendation would be to start an ISO 27001 project. Remember that this is not a requirement for the regulation. The regulation requires an ISMS, but it doesn't prescribe the framework that you use. From my experience, it is easier to align more with the requirements of the regulation if you have ISO 27001. You don't have to go for certification, but at the end of the day, if you build it, you might as well get the certification. So having a baseline from which you work from, that is an ISMS. On top of that is your compliance with the other regulations, like the business side of things, the NIS2, GDPR, and all that. And on the safety side, the paradise we are talking about today, the goal is to get to a point where we have security for safety risk assessment, and this helps us to achieve risk management beyond the box ticking exercise of compliance. Okay, and this also includes your risk management or your risk assessment being scenario based, like we've talked about earlier. And as I will talk more later on about your continuous improvement, because that is really, really important. Remember that at the end of the day, we want to achieve resilience, business resilience. And at that level is where you have the capacity to be able to address advanced level of cybersecurity attack. So the question is, how do we go about this? And next slide, please. I always like using this analogy from a professor who was explaining to his students how to make decisions about priorities in life. He used a jar. He brought out a jar and filled it with rocks to the brim, and asked the student if there was still space in the jar, and they said no, because obviously you couldn't fit in more rocks. And then he brought out some smaller rocks, some pebbles, and because there were still spaces, and he added more, and then brought sand and filled the jar again, and asked them if it was filled, and they said yes. He reached out and brought out a bottle of beer, representing, at the end of the day, after the day's job, you relax with a beer. However, the message here he tried to show to his students was this. He said that the jar represented their lives, and the rocks represented the most important decisions and the most important things in life, and down to the sand. If you start filling the jar with the sand, you won't have space to fill in the more important things. So how do we bring this to what we're talking about? The jar in this case will represent your journey to what we recommend, going beyond compliance. And your first and most important priorities will be that of safety, to protect people's lives. Okay, we're not saying here that anybody should guarantee safety, because nobody can do that. However, we need top management commitment to safety. And one thing I recommend to organizations is including this in the accountable managers statements in the ISMM. And one thing you can add there is a commitment to fund all the risk treatment plans that relate to risk with potential impact on aviation safety. So the first point is saving people's life, focusing on everything and the risks that could lead to aviation safety outcome of more than measure, which includes hazardous and catastrophic. Okay. The second priority is representing the pebbles, will be the other important aspect of the business, because obviously we need the business to run, we need the business to make money. Aircraft on ground, AOG, means that business is losing money, for example. So this is where you focus on operational reliability to protect your business. And the next step, which is the sand, is where you focus on best practices. Okay, so you see that if you start on the journey focusing on best practices and missing out on the more important things, then you, at the end of the day, you will struggle to achieve the goal. And the final point here, the beer, represents connecting the dots, filling the gaps, and your continuous improvement. So when you remember the stages we talked about, you build, you run, and then you improve. So after you have built your ISMS documented, you're implementing it, collecting your KPIs on daily activities, and conducting lessons learned, and creating your continuous improvement. Which, by the way, our recommendation is that this needs to be proactive in the sense that it needs to evolve in order to address new threats. Remember, at the end of the day, that we are talking about an ISMS, which is a living document. It doesn't just end where you tick a box that, okay, we have our ISMS, we conduct risk assessment, and that is it. No, it is a living document, in which case that you need to improve, find opportunities to improve things. And the next slide is really a summary of these priorities before I hand over back to my colleague. Is for you to remember that you need to start prioritizing the most important things, and then work your way down to the best practices, and then having a structure in place for continuous improvement. And I will hand over to my colleague, Sunani.
Perfect. Thank you, Tadeusz. So we've gone over the Part IS regulations, some of the challenges, how to start achieving those lean implementations. So my colleague today has went through, starting off with those major safety conditions, and then working your way downwards. And then obviously with all of this, with this regulation and with what the type of ISMS you need to be implementing, if we could demonstrate on the next slide, is that it's always going to be work in progress. So it's not a case where we just establish the ISMS and we sit and we forget about it until the authorities come knocking on the door. Well, actually, we have to continuously be adapting it and changing it, because it's always going to change as our processes and our organizations change, as our risk assessments may change. If we do have incidents, that will change many things, many processes that we may have written down need to be changed. So it's always important to have that reflective mindset. That's how you can make sure that you maintain a successful ISMS. Otherwise, you're investing time and money into an ISMS that will quickly become outdated. So also understand that this is a long-term strategy. You're not going to have this perfectly implemented ISMS in the case of even a year or even a few months, right? This is long-term, and this is something that the regulations also know. So Tadeusz has already touched on what the expectation is from the regulations now, making sure that you have those processes established, and you have got approval from the authorities of your ISMN that you've sent out to them, that you've established your roles and responsibilities, for example. Tadeusz has also touched on identifying those major safety risks, right? So let's identify what situations could occur that could stem potentially from our IT/OT infrastructure that could potentially have a safety consequence that we haven't already identified. So then as we progress, we need to understand all safety risks. So after we've identified those major critical ones that have where human life is at risk, we can start going on to your minor ones, and start looking at what other risks are, and understanding, making sure that you have the overall picture and that you have identified all of those safety risks. We also have to make sure that we know any safety relevant risks that arise from our third parties. So this is, again, a bigger conversation. Do we have documentation on who our third parties are? Do they align with our cybersecurity posture and our expectations of what cybersecurity should look like, and how our information is shared and how our data is stored, for example? And if they were to be breached, if they were to have a security incident, are they contracted to tell us? Because what the regulation expects now is that we should be. So as an organization, all of my third parties that I've identified as being safety relevant are contracted to tell me if they've had a security breach or a safety breach. And that too, within the time limit that I've set out of 24 hours or 72 hours, for example. So making sure that you have an understanding of your entire organizational ecosystem, including your third parties. And then we go on. So we're constantly evaluating it and improving it. So that will naturally start happening as we start going through and conducting our processes and seeing, okay, this risk management strategy may need to change, or we may need to implement this, or we've had this incident and we've identified from the learnings from this incident that the process that we had originally outlined didn't quite fit. So these are the reflections that now need to be made. So again, you're constantly monitoring these activities. You're constantly monitoring your ISMS activities, making sure everything's documented, because that's all going to be audited. But also having this mentality of a risk-averse mentality. So now when you are bringing in new suppliers, or when you are bringing in new contractors, or when you're bringing in new IT equipment, we're looking at it from a different stance now. Now we're trying to identify, okay, if this was to be breached, or if there was some kind of incident on this platform, could it have a safety relevance? Could it cause some kind of safety condition? Because we weren't really having those conversations before. So obviously we're already looking at your third parties, your inventory that you've currently got, but also what you're about to implement. So that's to make sure that we don't, fall behind, for example. So again, it's a continuous circle where there's definitely going to be cultural changes, continuous improvement, making sure that we're learning lessons from this whole entire process, and making sure that we're monitoring that our ISMS is actually effective. So of course, everything has to be documented, because this is what the authorities are looking at, but also you want to make sure that everyone is doing what they're supposed to be doing within the organization. The whole goal is to prevent any safety condition from occurring, right? So that's the ultimate goal here. So we never want to be in that situation. So for us to be able to do that, we need to make sure that we've got all of this in place, and we've got these processes in place, and making sure that everyone's doing what they're meant to be doing. So that's a quick wrap around there. We can go quickly onto the next slide. So we've obviously at AP have been doing this for a while now. So we've obviously got different work packages and how we can come in and help. So here's a quick overview on some of these activities, from gap assessments, training, strategic advisory, conducting risk assessment, helping you throughout the entire end-to-end process, right? We can also conduct part A as pre-audits for you. So this is just a quick slide to demonstrate all of those activities that we can conduct. But again, the key stage is making sure that you're continuously improving from the learnings that we've given you, or you've done yourself, or any activities that you've conducted in-house. Then making sure that you're continuously improving from that, and improving from the authority audits as well. So that's a quick wrap up on what we've put forward here today. We can go on to the Q&A, I believe, now.
Thank you so much. I'd like to now introduce as well Jan Berger. He's a Part AS service leader, governance and compliance security expert at Airbus Protect, who will join us for the Q&A. So I'm just going to go through some of the questions, first of all, that we've got in the chat. So we just scroll up. So earlier it was asked if these slides will be shared after the presentation. Absolutely. You'll probably get an email tomorrow. And also the webinar will be shared, the recording, but that takes a little bit of time, but you will be getting that in the next sort of few weeks. Jason has asked, this is in relation to the what's next section. If you identify an incident that could or will have an impact on aviation safety, unsafe condition, what are the external reporting steps? And do you immediately call the competent authorities, then send a report within 24 hours, then follow-up report? Would this be correct? Does anyone like to take that?
Okay. Do you want to confirm if Jan can be unmuted to join the conversation? But yes,
I am. I'm here.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Welcome, Jan.
I'll make a start, and Jan and Sunana, feel free to add to it, please. In a nutshell, my answer will be yes. But remember, the reporting, there is a deadline to the reporting, and there are other regulations like EU Regulation 376/2014, which is about reporting of occurrences. But what I would recommend is, and what we've seen in practice is, many organizations are reusing what they are currently using in the SMS, like ECAS, to report to ESR. So if that system already exists, then the deadlines are well defined. But the ultimate deadline is the 72 hours within which you need to report. If your organization falls under other regulations, like the NIS2 regulation, you have a different form of reporting, which is broken down even more granular than the Part IS regulation.
Okay,
maybe I would complement by saying that be careful on when you consider that the incident is safety relevant, because always, as a SOC works, it starts with events, but event is not an incident. So the very first thing in your process is to make sure that when you consider a set of events is to be considered as an incident, okay, then you are going to open an incident. But do you know at this very time if this incident is safety relevant? So it means that you may complement the investigation that is already up and going to make sure that this incident is safety relevant. And it's only when you have the certitude that you acknowledge that this incident is safety relevant that you will perform your immediate notification to authorities and then prepare the report for the next 72 hours. It means that potentially, if the incident occurred 6 months ago, but you just discover it, then it's a thing. But if it is an ongoing attack, it is only when you will determine that it is still ongoing that you will start reporting. In any way, there will be a time lapse for moving from event to incident and then performing the investigation to ensure that it is safety relevant. So it may have already a couple of days, even more, to make sure this incident is safety relevant.
Thank you, Jan. We move on to the next question. Farouk has asked, what is your opinion on the relationship between AMC 2042, product security, cybersecurity requirements, and Part IS requirements for a Part 21 DOA? Should they share a common risk assessment approach or risk acceptance criteria, or should the product security side shall be treated completely within type certification studies and not be fully governed by Part IS system?
So to make sure that we all connect the good information, the AMC 2042 is the way to make sure that all flying machines, that's to say propeller aircraft, rotor aircraft, and jet aircraft, are implementing cybersecurity assessment during the design of the aircraft. So this is now integrated into the design activities, and since 2019, it is integrated in the certification specification 25, part 1319. Nevertheless, it is not to be mixed with the Part IS and the relationship with Part 21 in this perspective. Why? First, because an aircraft is something very stable. Even when we talk about E-enabled aircraft, that's to say aircraft that have an information system embedded, this information system is very stable. It doesn't change from day 1 to day 2 because it is certified. That is absolutely not the case of information system on ground. For instance, the information system that will support the design activities. And it is on this information system that supports the design activities, the processes implemented inside the DOA, that yes, the Part IS is to be implemented.
Thank you, Jan. Dan has asked, is there a deadline for audits?
From the moment the regulation will be entered into force. So after this, I guess that the first companies and first organization that will be audited will be the most matured. As an example, audits have already started in Airbus. A pre-audit was done on the DOA a few months ago, and the very first audit on the POA is, I think, already ongoing.
Thank you.
Can I just add to that, just to remind us that when we talk about audit, let's remember there are two types of audit here. The pre-audit, which obviously is done like in the classical ISMS internal audit, and then the audit by the authority. And my recommendation is that the pre-audit is done before the applicability date, so that you have the confidence that you've done what you need to do. And in terms of the authority audit, currently, to the best of my knowledge, there's no deadline, but that you should expect that the authority can come knocking anytime after the applicability date, maybe from 18 months, as we currently understand it now. But the advice would be to just get ready and not be caught unprepared.
Thank you, Thaddeus. Christoph has asked, how does Airbus plan to transfer responsibilities to small suppliers who, for example, only have ISO 9001 certification? Will new contracts, quality assurance agreements be drawn up for this purpose?
Okay,
I can. Yes, Thaddeus, move on, please.
Okay. Just a quick one.
I will complete if you need.
Just to say that I'm not speaking for Airbus, because if you remember from our introduction, we're Airbus Protect. But however, what we do know is that with the introduction of Part IS, contracts will need to be updated, okay, to come in line with the compliance requirements, especially where you have responsibilities that needs to be cascaded or requirements that need to be cascaded to your supply chain. And I think that is this will be on case by case, depending on the context, and obviously depending again on what contract you already have in place. Yeah.
Yes, I think that whatever we are talking about, Airbus or any company, when we are talking about the suppliers, the very first question is to identify, does the supplier has an approved organization? Because if the supplier has already an approved organization, then he has to comply with the Part IS. Then the second question is, in case this supplier do not have any approved organization, but is identified as having interfaces submitted to mutual exposure, then in that case, it remains the contractor that remain in charge, and it is on the contractor to perform the necessary oversight of the supplier and handle the risks in the expected way as per the regulation. The very last case is for all suppliers providing information security management activities. Here it will be a bit more tricky because there is a dedicated regulation requirement for this one, the OR 235, that explicitly requires that the delivered activities are delivered in compliance with the Part IS itself, with few adjustments because, of course, the supplier is not submitted to any approval. So in that case, it means that, for instance, a service provider that is providing SOC activities for a contractor that can have safety-related incident. Yes, indeed, we must make sure that the SOC activities will be delivered in a way that it cannot be jeopardized and in that way miss some safety relevant incident. That's why in that case it will be a bit more tricky, I guess.
Thank you, Jan.
Sorry, Francesca, because I note we only have one more question. If you can go back to slide 16, I don't think it wasn't shown. Just want to bring up a point there.
16. Say stop when.
Hang on. No, you skipped it. Maybe you need to stop presenting and just present that one. 16, please.
In the meantime, I will just answer the last question.
Okay.
Yes, indeed, the ISMM and the ISMM, the ISMS and the ISMM could be only one document. This is just a question of organization. Barely what we identified is to establish the ISMS regarding the Part IS expectations. It should be around a set of 40 documents if you establish it as per an ISMS, or it can be only one ISMM that will have somehow 40 chapters in that perspective.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jan. What I wanted to point out from here is to remind us that third-party management, regarding the question before the last, is one of the big challenges that we see. And just like the iceberg, the contracts are just a tiny bit that we know about. So there are a lot more that needs to be done underneath. Okay, and this includes, like Jan was explaining, identifying your third parties, classifying them in terms of their safety criticality or safety relevance, and then those that have approved organizations, which have they're answerable to the competent authority. But then you need to define a contract. An example is given in ED 201 on how to draft a contract. I think ED 201 section 4, 4.1 or thereabout, to draft a contract between yourself and the other supplier or third party who has an approved organization, and then all the risk management and everything you need to do to manage your risk, the risk and your third parties, like you said. Time won't allow us to go into deep with that, but just to remind you that there are a lot more underneath than the contract. For Francesca, thank you.
Fabulous. I'd like to wrap up now and thank the experts for their time to address all the challenges, and a huge thank you to you all for your time today. We really value your participation in today's Part IS webinar with Airbus Protect. We'll be following up, as mentioned, with the slides of the webinar so you have them for reference. As you can see on the screen, here is our contact details, and I invite you to contact Hamza, our engagement manager here at Airbus Protect. If you have any further questions or anything specifically about your organisation itself, our experts and Hamza can talk you through it. Thank you very much for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you, everybody.